that is posted in the, it's in the Slack channel. So if you're on Slack, I'm just going to open mine up so you guys can see it. So in the Slack, there's all these different like topics over here out to the side, like announcements saying transaction Thursday starting, and here's the link. So under support is where I generally post like useful information that will help you. So like here is, oh, here's our website. And if you need to schedule an appointment with Carl, Jen, or Ritz, you can schedule it on the website. You just click the link, sign up for a time. Then we put out a little survey that we want you guys to fill out yesterday. So this is all under support. Opportunities is generally when agents need you to like do an open house or open a door for them or something like that. If you have a question, then you post it in here, or if Carl or Todd or I have a question for you guys, we put it in there. Tips and tricks like, oh, here's a learning moment, and I shared it. So we just have different topics over here. So always be checking these channels, but the case studies are on our team website, which I just showed you where that link is. And right here at the top, case studies, you just click on this little link right here. And it is going to open up the case studies. Ritz, why are you so awesome? See, he made him look so nice. I love Ritz. Okay, so why? And you can jump to a topic here. Why, how you're going to do it. You'll have an MLS number. It's a fake scenario. You're going to make up a fictitious client. You're going to complete all the documents that represent the client. See the KWW. KWW means Keller Williams Westfield. That's our brokerage transaction checklist. You can see Ritz has a quick scroll. Here's the checklist you need for buyers. Here's the checklist you need for listings. And then you're going to have a fake scenario, make a fake client in Command, but the first two, you're going to handwrite. You're going to print them out, which Carla can help you do that at the front desk. You're going to assume the dates are like today is the day you write the offer, and that acceptance is 3 days for the, okay, let me start over. You're going to put acceptance, which a normal typical transaction, you want to give a seller at least 24 hours to respond. That's the polite thing to do, unless you're late to the game and you know they're responding sooner than 24 hours. So that would be an exception. But for the dates in section 24 of the REPC, the seller disclosure is going to be 3 days after acceptance. Due diligence is going to be 10. C is 21, that's financing and appraisal, and D is settlement, and that's 30 days. We want you to put actual dates. Don't just write this, 3 days from acceptance, 10 days, 21, 30. We want you to get the calendar out and figure out the dates. Do not submit to the Market Center when you put them in Command for case studies 3, 4, and 5. You're just going to reach out to me and let me know that they're done. Like I said, on case studies number 1 and 2, you're going to print them out and you're going to complete them by hand. Case studies 3, 4, and 5 will be completed in Command, and you will use DocuSign, and you will either email me from Command all your completed files, or you'll send me a text. And there's videos, let me show you guys, on our team website. You scroll down here to the bottom, Ritz is so awesome, and he puts all our past trainings in here. Transaction Thursday. So this would be our last one. So you could come in and watch and see. These are all on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and watch the past couple ones where I did a deeper dive into what the case studies are and things like that, then you can go back and watch those and they will help you. I think I'm going to pivot a little bit today. And what I want to do is, here's case study number 1. You're going to print it out and you're going to fill it out by hand. You're going to base it off of this MLS number. So you're going to log into your MLS account. And you're going to sign in. And you guys feel free to stop me at any time if you have any question like, Jen, what does MLS mean? Well, that's the nickname of Utah Real Estate's website. So please jump in. Interrupting is totally accepted for this. So case study number 1 is going to be built off of this old MLS number. So we're going to copy that and come here. And at the top, you can either search by address, agent, or MLS number. So I'm going to click there and I'm going to paste. This is what your offer is going to be based off of. So you want to use the information from this listing here to create your REPC. If you want to open a new window so you can do multiple things at the same time on the MLS, you just hit this new tab button. So this is going to open up a new tab so that this one doesn't shut out over here. So the forms you're going to need, you go to URE, Utah Real Estate Legacy Forms. And for this case study, you're going to need to print out, we're going to need a REPC. So I just typed that in here, and then I'm going to get a regular old REPC, and I'm going to hit the plus sign. It does not say that we need any addendums. This one we tried to keep very simple, but we do, like it tells us, for each case study, we have to do all the brokerage required documents. So let's go look here. We need the buyer broker agreement. So we're going to exclusive buyer broker agreement. We're going to hit the plus sign. And we're going to go back. We need the BBA disclosure form. That's a brokerage document. So that means it's on the brokerage website. Or if you're logged into your DocuSign, you could download it from there, but just as easy to go on the brokerage site. So let me show you that. That is kwwestfield.com. Then you go to Agent Resources. This little pop-up comes up, but you can just close it. Agent Resources, Important Documents. In here is the disclosure and waiver. If your clients ever waive any of their rights under the REPC, like they waive appraisal, they waive due diligence, don't ever do that. They waive financing. Cash deals, you waive financing and appraisal. Your clients have to sign. The BBA ERS disclosure addendum, we need to download that. So I'm just going to show you a copy of it. So then you would download that to print. And then you're going to need the for-year protection. So we're going to download that. So here, so you can get a look at it. We'll go over those in just a second. So let's come back to our list. We need the BBA disclosure form. We got that. We need wire fraud. That's on the MLS. So let's come here and type wire fraud, and we're going to add that. And then let's come back. And then we got the due diligence checklist. Nope, didn't do that yet. So I'm just going to type in buyer due diligence checklist, add that. And then for your protection, we downloaded that on the brokerage site. So now we have all our brokerage required documents here. This is based on an old MLS. I'm not going to make you print it out. The disclosure and waiver isn't required on this case study. We do have a REPC. We don't need an addendum. We can't get the seller disclosures because it's not a real deal. But I would like you guys to fill out an earnest money confirmation. So let's go back to that. So earnest money deposit, confirmation of earnest money receipt. So we're going to add that. So then we just say create packet. And then what you guys are going to do is you're just going to hit the print PDF. And like I said, you can do this at the office. You get, I think it's 250 free copies a month at the office. So Carla will help you set your computer up with the printers in the office, and then you can select, do you want it to print on the main floor? Do you want it to print in the day use area? That's on the north end of the building. Do you want the other one that's on the south end? So there's different printer options. And so you can print all these out at the office and then hand fill them out. And then yesterday, Cash, he just texted me pictures of all the pages, which was totally fine. And then I just let him, he did a really awesome job. I was so proud. He had minor things to fix. You guys do not be surprised. I would be literally shook if you didn't have something that I needed to correct because you're new at this. So what I want to do just really quickly while we just have some time left is I just really want to go over the REPC and the different sections and these different documents for you guys. If we run out of time, there are videos on the, what do we call it, Ritz now? Let me see here. Don't want to say the wrong name. It is the high performance team where you have access to all these training videos. There's a whole series of videos on going over the REPC, going over a buyer broker, going over wire fraud. So you can watch a short video about each document because you're going to forget. Even though I go over it with you today, you're going to forget what each document means. and how they apply to your client. So we have videos on here so you can go back and rewatch and rewatch. You know, watch before you go do a listing appointment, watch before you meet with your buyer, because you're just going to want to become more familiar with those. Okay, so let's look at this Rep C. The offer reference date is always the date you're writing it. Any subsequent addendums on the deal will always have this same offer reference date. That's what ties it together, okay? So this is what ties your contract together. Your client's name, that's the buyer. So for these case studies, like literally you can do John and Jane Doe. Who's the seller? We would just come here on the MLS, and this says on file. You can always click the tax ID number to find the seller's name. So you could just put a fake seller's name in here. That's totally fine. How much earnest money? Now our case study tells you that you are going to do $2,500. So your earnest money is the deposit that your client has to make within, as you'll notice right here, 4 calendar days from acceptance, you guys. 4 calendar days, delivered no later. Then the brokerage has 4 days to deposit it into their account. So let's say the 4th day was a Saturday and you were in receipt of it and you went and slid it under the door at Novalee's office so that we were in receipt of it within 4 calendar days. Then Novalee Sunday, let's say Monday was a holiday, the brokerage has 4 days to get that deposited. So this legally covers us. Now you might say, well, my client doesn't have any earnest money going hard. So that does that mean they have to deposit that? Yes. Per this contract, any earnest money that your client says they're going to deposit has to be deposited has to be turned in within 4 calendar days. Okay, so you always want to check with your client and say, do you have this cash in your bank account? Can you write a check? Is it going to clear? It's super awkward at first because you're going to feel like, wow, I'm just getting super personal with these people. A way kind of around that is to do a meeting with the lender and say, hey, lender, how much money do they have, like as liquid cash? Could they do an earnest money up to $10,000? Then you can kind of avoid those uncomfortable conversations. But let me just warn you, you might as well have them because you're going to get so entrenched in their lives that you might as well just get used to it. We always deposit this in the form of either a check or an electronic transfer. Our brokerage does not allow wire transfers. This electronic transfer is essentially a wire transfer. It's like an e-check, and we send them a request from an app called Earnest that's secure, and we send them information about that. Here you put the property address, the entire thing. Then here you would put the city, the county, the zip code, and the tax ID number. Okay, but up here on this property line, put the entire address. That's best. Then inclusions or exclusions, you can always find that on the MLS listing. So what's being included with the property? Now this next part, a lot of people get confused. This says what's going to be conveyed under a separate bill of sale. That's like Lane Thompson has a deal right now where his clients are buying what was like a nightly rental up in Park City. And so the sellers are selling it furnished. That would be conveyed on a separate bill of sale. And so you would mark R. There are separate things being conveyed, and then the seller would give us an itemized list. So if you ever have clients who want to buy a nightly rental locally or even in St. George, you would mark this R. Traditionally, you're 99% of the time going to mark there are not things being sold on a separate bill of sale. Excluded. What's excluded? Common things are fridge, washer, dryer, things like that sellers want to take with them so that they're not out that money in their new place to buy those things. This is so important to check when you're a listing agent. I can't tell you how many times I've seen agents have to buy their clients things because they didn't realize the buyer checked refrigerator when the client really wanted it excluded. So you really, really want to check over these sections and go over them with your clients. The water services, this is water rights. Any water rights that are said to go with the property on the MLS, go with the property. If there was stuff excluded, notice it says specifically excluded, then they would go in this section. I just usually put not applicable. It just doesn't apply unless your client's usually buying acres of land. There usually aren't water shares. You're going to put your total purchase price up here in section 2. Then you're going to put what your earnest money is right here. So I think on this offer, it said to do 295. So we would put that 295 up here. And then we had our 2,500 earnest money. And then there's not additional earnest money being paid. New loan, we're gonna have to do some math. There's no seller financing. My client, let's say my client's putting 20,000 plus their earnest money down. So they're putting $22,500 down. So I would do the math. Oh, Michelle's hopping on. Hello, our friend Michelle. Let's see here. Sorry, guys, I'm just getting texts, making sure there's nothing emergency. Okay, so we're gonna take our 295 and we're gonna subtract our 22,500. So our new loan is 272,500. This is especially important, like on a house of this price, if someone was putting $20,000 down, that's gonna speak volumes to the listing agent, because this means this loan is gonna be pretty dang secure. Do they have a house to sell? Nope, they don't have a house to sell. If they do, there's an addendum. You'll learn about that in a later case study. Settlement. This goes over all the details of settlement. We come here to possession. When is that new buyer going to take possession of that property? Upon recording means everybody has signed and the loan has funded and it has recorded with the county. If the house is vacant, that's totally fine. If it's occupied, I say a general good rule of thumb is 48 hours. Now, you might call the listing agent before and say, what's important to your client? And they might say, my clients need a week to get out of the house. And so then you might select this and you might say, okay, we'll give them 7 days to get out. That's totally fine. But that's where good communication with the listing agent comes in. And that's going to help you win offers in a crazy market like this. Todd's asking. Sorry, guys. It never ends for me, you guys. I'm like constantly multitasking. Okay, anyhow. All right, let's scroll down here. Prorations. This one's super important. This one almost cost my mom $2,500 this week. If you do not know if there are special assessments on a property, they can be assessed by the city, an HOA, or the county, then you mark seller. You do not want your buyer to be on the hook. Next, HOA change fees. They call them ownership fees. They call them reinvestment fees. They call them enhancement fees. Doesn't matter what they're called. It's a change of ownership fee. And unless you know exactly what it is, I highly recommend, this is what almost cost my mom $2,500, that you mark other if there's an HOA and you put a cap. You can see previous offers I've written here. Buyer will pay up to $400. Buyer will pay $1,378. Buyer will pay up to $500. Say up to, because that means if it's less than, then that's all that your buyer's paying. They're not paying more than is required. So we just have to be really careful about our wording on things like this. So I recommend putting a cap of buyer will pay up to, and then a specific amount, whatever your client can afford, to make their offer look more enticing. The problem is my mom, bless her heart, thought it was $500 and it was really 0.5%, which is $2,500. Luckily, she's working with a great agent in our office who was like, my mistake, my client will eat it. Oh, phew. Okay, great. So we always want to be specific there. Here, you need to write the other agent's name and their brokerage. And if they're just representing the seller, then you would mark seller. If it's another agent at our office, then you have to mark buyer and seller as a limited agent, okay? So this Dean is representing on this one. And it's still KW Westfield. And, oh wait, sorry, that's where his license number goes. If you're wondering, where do I find an agent's license number? Let's go back here again. You can search this agent box and it will tell you their license number. So you can search their name. Really quickly, I just wanted to stop really quick. Ritz, is this going to be the same Zoom link that Jordan and Alex's class is taught on?
I will switch over to the training.
It's okay. I just want, let me ask really quickly, of the four of you, Jesse, Cade, Michelle, and Wilson that are on here, are you hoping to watch Jordan and Alex's class at 10, or are you more interested in doing the transaction class? You're not going to offend me in the least. Anybody have preferences? Because I can keep going on transactions, but if you were hopping on this link, hoping to see that class for Jordan and Alex, we can wrap things up for today. But if you want me to keep going, I will. Anybody?
What was the question? Sorry, I had to go save a baby from eating raisins and choking to death. I didn't hear.
Wilson, did you say transactions?
Yeah.
Okay, Michelle, did you want me to keep going?
I didn't hear the question because I had to go get my baby. What
Oh,
was
okay.
the question?
Are you hoping to watch Jordan and Alex's class on turning your data bank into a database into a data bank?
I have no preference, personally.
Okay, then I'll keep going. Ritz, are you okay to start a separate Zoom link for that class?
Yeah, sure. I can do it on my other device.
Oh, thank you, Ritz. We love you. Thank you. Okay, we'll keep going, you guys. And if at any time you want to hop off, like I said, you do not offend me. But let's keep going on this, like a deeper dive into the contract. So because Dean's at our same brokerage, we could copy this brokerage number. Again, you can search that at the top. Let me just show you. So I can just search KW Westfield here. And then if I just click on any listing that's in the office and you scroll down to the bottom and you hit this brokerage thing, it shows you that office's brokerage ID, okay? Now, if this was a FSBO, for sale by owner, we use a lot of acronyms, you guys. So if you ever aren't understanding what the acronyms are, just say, Jen, I have no idea what that means. So if for sale by owner, you would just write FSBO in this spot and there would be no brokerage or license number. But since I'm representing the buyer, and then again, the brokerage is representing both buyer and seller, we're allowed to do that, do transactions with other agents in the office. We are not allowed to have myself representing the seller and myself representing the buyer. That's the point at which you pay another agent a referral fee, or myself or Carl or someone else on the team to represent either the buyer or the seller, and you just give them a referral fee. Let's keep scrolling. So this is confirmation of agency that always needs to be filled out. Title insurance, this goes over what title insurance is and who's going to pay for it. The seller pays for an owner's policy. Now, this is a section that a lot of agents don't know a lot about. This is called Section 7 of the REPC, and it goes over what falls under the seller disclosures. Under the seller disclosures is not just simply, let me show you the document. There is a document called the Seller Property Condition Disclosure, okay? This right here. Now, if I printed the packet, you would see that, here, let me just show you. You put your client's information up here. You'll have to do this for the listing that you have to do for case studies. You'll just have to print it out and fake fill it out. So your seller's name and address, your seller has to answer every single one of these questions. Yes, no, or not applicable. The number one problem, by far, that we have on listings is that we send this over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter how many emails or how many text messages we send your clients saying you have to mark every question. I've had 3 deals this week where I think we have resent this 3 separate times to get them to fill the entire thing out. So they have to fill the entire thing out. The reason your client is filling out these seller property condition disclosures is if they know a problem about their house and they disclose it on this document, the buyer cannot come back later and sue them because of it. Now, if they knew about a problem, I had a buyer buy a house that the sellers knew about a sprinkler problem causing flooding in the basement and they didn't disclose it. They luckily avoided court and went between the 2 brokers and worked it out. But the sellers had to pay I think it was $5,000 to correct the drainage problem, dig out around the window well, and pay for all of it. They didn't disclose it on the seller disclosures and they knew about it. So it is best for your client to be as honest as possible. I will say one section here, mold. There is a difference between mold and mildew. A lot of people get mildew in their shower areas or on the shower windows and things like that. That is not mold, that is mildew. So some people will disclose that they've had mold, and then we have to go back to them and say, no, 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 no. Let me explain to you. There is a difference between mildew and what we're talking about when we're talking about mold, black mold on walls and things like that. So there is a huge difference. Mildew, we just spray some bleach, we can wipe it off, and it's completely fine. So just make sure, maybe once your client signed a listing agreement and you go over to their house, you might want to take them a printed copy of this and just sit down with them and say, hey, just want to go over this with you. You can fill it out by hand, but my assistant will send you, notice the word I use there, my assistant. Yeah, you have an assistant, me and my team. We're here to help you guys. Makes you sound awesome. They will send you an electronic copy if you want to fill it out on your computer. But if it's easier for you, generally older clients, fill it out by hand, and I'll swing back by and I'll pick it up, and we'll scan it and put it into the computer for you. We have started posting these, all HOA documents and all of these seller disclosure items that are applicable. Notice it says lead-based paint disclosure if the house was built prior to 1978. That means January 1, 1978, not required. December 31st, 1977, required. So there's the breakdown there. So the seller disclosure deadline does not just mean that seller property condition disclosure was sent. That's part of it right here on A. It means any of these things that apply to the property. Lead-based paint, a commitment for title insurance, which we order before your listing even goes live. That's called opening escrow. Copy of any CC&Rs. I don't live in an HOA, but I have city CC&Rs that impact my property from Saratoga Springs. So again, we get those from title. If there is an HOA, most recent meeting minutes, budget, and financial statements, any long-term lease agreements affecting the property, any short-term rental bookings that are scheduled, a copy of existing property management agreements. Maybe they have a property management company that is taking care of their short-term rental bookings. We have to have a copy of that. Water right paperwork, written notice of any claims or environmental problems with the property. And then FERPTA is a foreign investment person that owns a property, then we have to send that paperwork. If your client is buying a property and they're like, you know what, there's been a lot of foundation problems in this area of Linden or Cedar Hills, I want, if they have any foundation reports, I want them to have to send that over. Well, then we just add that on the bottom, and that becomes part of those seller disclosures, okay? That is the very first deadline, usually, even before earnest money. Seller disclosures are usually within like 48 to 72 hours of going under contract. So that's why as a listing agent, we have started putting them on the MLS so that people can look at it before and make a decision. Oh, they're disclosing this issue with the property. Yeah, I don't care. That's not a big deal to me. So we load them on the MLS for you. Let me show you. So if you're a buyer's agent, let me show you one right now that I know has those attached so you can see where that is. Right here for Melanie Aird. This house had foundation problems. Guess what? Right here says attached documents. If I click this, you guys will see what my team attached to this. HOA, budget, HOA fees, governing docs, title commitment, seller disclosures, reserve report. All of it's attached here so that as people looked at the property, we are just disclosing everything to them and they have access to those documents. Any questions? I always just feel like I'm rambling to you guys. Okay. So like I said, that's generally your first big deadline. We put all of these deadlines on your calendar and your clients. So we send you calendar invites for everything so that you're aware and your client's aware. Buyer due diligence, what is that? Well, everything that your client finds out from here in section 7, they have the right to do their due diligence and look into it. If they want to be able to park an RV at their house, then they better look at these CC&Rs from this HOA and find out if they're allowed to park an RV at their house. If they want to, if they're buying a 10-acre parcel of land and they want to know if they can subdivide it later and build on it, and it's currently taxed with a green belt status, which means that it's like agricultural, they 99% of the time, to take it out of green belt status and move it to regular tax status, have to pay the last 3 to 5 years of taxes. That can be like $10,000 to $20,000, you guys. But developers know that. It's your job to know these things as well so that you can educate your client. Your client wants to buy a 10-acre parcel and build on it. Well, let's go to the city and see what it's zoned. Is this even possible? That's what your due diligence period is for. So that is why I'm saying you never want to waive this. If you're offering on a newer home and your client's not going to ask for repairs and you want to use that to make your offer more enticing, that's fine. But do not waive your due diligence, okay? Your buyer has the right to cancel or resolve objections. So let's say they find out that the HOA is requiring they put a fence up, and it's going to cost like $7,000 to $10,000. And the seller just hasn't done it and hasn't done it. Well, then your buyer might say, seller, I want you to pay for half of it with me. You would resolve that objection. Or you would say, oh, there's some water damage from the tub overflowing. I mean, my kids have done it in my bathroom here. I want the seller to replace all the baseboards in the main floor bath. Okay, you have the right to resolve that objection. Or the house needs a new roof. I want the seller to put a new roof on. These all have to be resolved before this due diligence deadline is up. You cannot resolve them after the fact. You have to resolve them before, or the seller could say, take a hike. I'm not going to do it. Now, sometimes you will be negotiating with an agent in good faith. I understand that, but at least have some emails and text messages in writing to protect yourself. What we use to resolve these objections, just going to go to the forms library, is called a resolution of due diligence. So you're resolving any issues that came up from due diligence in here. I highly, highly, highly recommend you always talk to the lender first about how they would prefer you write those up so that we do not cause a red flag with underwriting. For instance, $20,000 to be held in escrow to make any and all necessary repairs. If you do that on an FHA loan, they're going to say, nope, we're not closing until the repairs have been completed. So there's just little caveats to things, and there's ways we would and would not write things. So reach out to the lender and say, hey, they're going to put a new roof on, but the money's going to be held in escrow. What's the best way to write this up for your underwriters? Can you email Jen and I and let us know? Then they'll send us an email and we'll get the addendum written up for you. Good communication is key when you're doing all these types of transactions. Next section, appraisal. The buyer is obligated to purchase the property is conditioned upon the property appraising or is not. You have to decide with your client. Sometimes clients can get appraisal waivers. If they're putting like 30% down or more, sometimes they can get an appraisal waiver where the lender's like, nope, they're so secure in buying this. It doesn't even matter if it's $5,000 or $10,000 upside down, we'll give them an appraisal waiver. Then you could say it's not conditioned. You'd have to have them sign that appraisal, this disclosure and waiver form here, because they're waiving one of their rights, but they've been given an appraisal waiver. So it's a pretty secure way to waive some of your protections. Most people are going to say it is conditioned upon appraisal. So this is referred to as the appraisal condition. Now let's look at this. If after completion of an appraisal by a licensed appraiser, the buyer receives written notice from the lender or the appraiser that the property has appraised for less than the purchase price, notice it says a notice of appraised value, you will get the copy of the appraisal from the lender. Buyer may cancel the REPC by providing written notice to the seller with a copy of the appraised value no later than the financing and appraisal date referenced above. C, whereupon the earnest money deposit shall be released to the buyer without the requirement of further written authorization from the seller. They automatically get their money back. 9 times out of 10, we tell them it didn't appraise. They don't require us to send it over. We cancel and we get our earnest money back. But you need to have that just in case. Failure to cancel. If the REPC is not canceled, as provided in section 8.2, buyer shall be deemed to have waived the appraisal condition, as except provided in sections 8.1b, right here, and 8.3bi, that's down here. This section is very confusing to people. That's why I wanted to point out that this references 8.3bi. The earnest money deposit shall become non-refundable. So you have been deemed to waive this except as provided in 8.1b or 8.3bi. So let's go to the financing, and then we're going to tie these two sections together. Financing condition, no financing required. That means it's a cash deal, a true cash deal. If it's a hard money lender, then there is still somebody that has to approve it. We have to say financing is required, but what we do is in our email to the other agent, when we send the offer, we say there's a hard money lender on this. This lets them know it's way more of a secure deal and much more like a cash transaction. Buyer's obligation to purchase the property is conditioned upon the buyer obtaining a loan. The condition references the financing condition if checked sections 8.3bi, 2 and 3 apply. Otherwise, they do not. So you cannot use this section or this section or this section if you say financing is not required. Okay. And it just says that your buyer's gonna work in good faith to obtain a loan. They're gonna do everything they can to get that loan to go through. Okay. Now here's the part that a lot of people get confused on. I explain this to agents all the time. The buyer's right to cancel before the financing and appraisal deadline. Okay. If the buyer and the buyer's sole discretion is not satisfied with the terms and conditions of the loan, the buyer may, after the due diligence deadline referenced in 24B, if applicable, cancel the REPC by providing written notice to the seller no later than the financing and appraisal date referenced in section 24C, whereupon, let's say we're going to say 1,000 of that 2,500 is non-refundable, essentially here, of the buyer's earnest money shall be released to the seller without the further written authorization of the buyer, and the remainder of the buyer's earnest money deposit will be released to the buyer without further written authorization from the seller. Okay, now you might be like, okay, that seems pretty straightforward. If we cancel after due diligence and before financing and appraisal, $1,000 goes to the seller. Kind of, because you have to remember how up here it referenced 8.3bi and it told us if the appraisal comes in low, then the buyer gets all their earnest money back. So the only exception to this $1,000 going to the seller is if the property appraises for less than the purchase price and you send a copy of that to the listing agent, then even this $1,000 goes back to the buyer. So I want that to sink in for a second. So if the buyer cancels after the due diligence and before the financing and appraisal date, that time in between there, and the appraisal met value, as we call it. So let's say the house was $295 like this one, and the appraisal came in at $295. If my buyer canceled in between there because they just decided they don't want to do it anymore, $1,000 would go to the seller. Now, scenario 2. After the due diligence, but before the financing and appraisal, the house appraised for $275,000 instead of $295,000. And my buyer cancels, and I send a copy of that appraisal over to the listing agent. My buyer gets all of their earnest money back, including this $1,000. So it's a way to put a little bit more skin in the game, but yet if the property doesn't appraise, your client still gets all their money back. Does that make sense? It will as you start doing the case studies. Okay. If your buyer cancels after financing and appraisal, all earnest money is non-refundable to the buyer. Except, you guys are gonna be like, what? How are there all these exceptions? Michelle, what is the exception that we learned? Do you remember?
FHA?
Yes, FHA and VA, the earnest money is never non-refundable to the buyer if it doesn't appraise. Okay. So if it doesn't appraise, my FHA buyer or VA buyer could cancel the day of settlement and get all of their money back. There's essentially not a deadline to them if it doesn't appraise. Now might be like, well, okay, but are houses really not appraising that often? Right now, I'd say 50-50. Okay. 50-50, they're not appraising. And then the other 50% of the time they are. If you would have asked me this 3 years ago, I would have said, oh yeah, probably only 10% of houses don't appraise. It is completely shifted because so many people are fighting over the same properties in 1 week. In 1 week, I saw 2 properties in Provo escalate from the listing price to $100,000 to $120,000 above. Those are not going to appraise, you guys. They are not. So is a seller going to accept an FHA or VA buyer at that point? Not if they have a good agent, no. It's going to need to be somebody who will offer money above appraised price or somebody who's paying cash flat out, because that is not going to appraise. Would I ever recommend anyone go upside down that much in a house? Not even a multi-million-dollar house, you guys. No, I would not. $120,000. No, that's just crazy talk. 5,000, 10,000, sure. If it's under $1 million, that's reasonable. You'll make that equity up in less than 6 months. Above $1 million, maybe 20, maybe 30. Again, you'll make that up in about 6 months. I would never recommend anybody go upside down $120,000 in a property. That's just me. Okay. All right, let's keep going on here. Earnest money deposits to be released. If the REPC's canceled, it tells you right here, 8.3 BI, buyer agrees that all of the buyer's earnest money deposits are deposits. If applicable, see 8.4. This just talks more about that section up here and how it relates to the appraisal. Additional earnest money. I rarely see people doing additional earnest money. The situation where you might see it is if your buyer has to sell a home. So let's say there will be an additional earnest money deposit of maybe $2,000 after it says that it's as provided in 8.3 or 8.1, 2, and 3, then no later than the due diligence or financing and appraisal deadline, whichever is later. 9 times out of 10 is always financing and appraisal. The buyer will deliver $2,000 more earnest money. So maybe you're just putting more skin in the game saying, listen, my buyer is going to get their house sold. This is a sure thing. We'll put more skin in the game at the financing and appraisal deadline to show your seller we're going to get this done. That would be a situation where we might see additional earnest money. Otherwise, like I said, I've literally maybe seen it. For those of you that don't know, I've probably been involved in over 1,500 transactions. My team did 518 last year alone. Less than 5 had additional earnest money. Okay, are there addenda? Are there any addendums that we want to merge with this REPC to be as part of our offer? On this one, for this case study, no. On other ones where it's like FHA or an escalation clause or an appraisal gap, then yes, there's going to be additional addendums. And you just mark yes, what the addendum number is. If it's FHA, if you have like a disclosure of interest or something, you can mark other and specify. Or if it's a limited agency, like both agents work at the same brokerage, then you could put that there. Home warranty. Home warranty plan. Be careful, you might mark this one correctly. I've seen a handful of times where agents don't. A 1-year home warranty plan will or will not be. Right now, maybe 25% of people get sellers to pay for it. Maybe that's maybe being a little positive. Buyers will put in that they're paying one because then it shows the seller, hey, if something does go wrong, they're going to have this home warranty in place, so they're not going to come after me. Just gives a little more security to the seller. It's not necessary. If it is included, the first one says that the plan should be ordered by, we always want to order our own. So we would say buyer, issued by a company that will be selected by the buyer. So the first two should always be buyer. And then who it's going to be for how much. Generally, you want them to be 500 on an average size home, 6 or more on something that's over 5,000 square feet. So just check with your home warranty company. So 5 is a safe bet. And then who's paying for it? That's what the last box is. So you always want it to be buyer, and then is it going to be the buyer paying or the seller? Generally speaking, we generally do buyer, seller. So just try to remember that in your head so that you don't mark the wrong box. The condition of the property, that it will be as is condition. The physical condition of the property, that, they're going to keep that property in good order before you take possession. The pre-settlement walkthrough, no earlier than 7 calendar days prior to settlement. It's different on builds. Some builders have you come in 2 weeks before, some builders have you come in a day before. Reasonable notice given to the seller. The buyer can conduct a final walkthrough. I've had sellers be a real pain in the butt and us have to push this and say, listen, we've given you 3 days notice that we want to do that. That's a reasonable amount of time you need to let us in. The pre-settlement walkthrough, again, it cites the terms that are applicable and the items, and that it needs to be repaired or corrected as agreed if you've had a due diligence addendum. The failure to conduct a final walkthrough inspection or to claim that an item is not represented shall not constitute a waiver of this right. So like my mom had clients that were out of state and they couldn't do a final walkthrough, and she went, well, they noticed things that she didn't notice, like that the blinds had been taken out and that wasn't included on the exclusions. And so just because they didn't claim it before it closed didn't mean they waived their right to that. So then we had to go back to the listing agent and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. They will bring those back and put them back up. So things can still be resolved after the fact, but you want to try and do the best you can to get everything resolved before settlement. Changes, this just goes over changes during the contract, talking about financial encumbrances, property management agreements, long-term agreements, short-term agreements, the authorities of the people signing, a complete contract saying that the Rep C with all of its addendums and the seller disclosures constitute the entire contract. This section, mediation. I believe it's $450 to go to mediation. Dean always recommends, our broker, that we write may at the options of the parties go to mediation. What that means is if we can resolve any issues agent to agent or broker to broker, that means we do not have to go to mediation. If we say shall, then that means we have to go to resolve problems, and that's $450. So just say may. If we can't resolve it, then yeah, we're going to go to mediation. It's not like shall means yes, we'll go, and may means no, we're not. It just means let us try to work it out, and then if we can't, we'll go. This one means nope. If there's any problems, we're going to mediation. Default. If the buyer defaults, then what are the remedies for the seller? Default means that they maybe didn't pay their earnest money on time. So if your client does not pay their earnest money within that 4 calendar days, you better get a written and signed addendum before that deadline is up, or you are considered in default of that contract. If the seller defaults, let's say the seller doesn't send you the seller disclosure items. Well, you have to address it at that point in time in the contract. Let's say we have been begging them to get those seller disclosure items and they just have not turned them over. Then your client could say, okay, I want to cancel, and I'm citing that the seller defaulted on the contract. The client is, right here it says, as liquidated damages, they get their earnest money back, and it says a sum equal to their earnest money deposit. So if my client deposited $2,500 and they're not turning over the seller disclosure items, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to park my RV, so I'm canceling, they would owe me another $2,500. But you have to deal with it then. If you do not deal with it within a reasonable amount of time, then you have waived your right to cite that they defaulted in that way. Does that make sense? If you don't deal with it when it happens, then you're basically saying you're okay with it. Notices, this is an important one. If an addendum or something says that you have to send notice, like for a lease back, or our settlement is going to be when the buyer gives the seller notice, notice is defined as, it has to be in writing or typed. It has to be signed by the seller or the buyer, whoever is the one giving the notice. And it has to be received by the buyer or the seller or their agent or their brokerage, no later than the applicable date referenced in the REPC or addendums if it's brought up in an addendum. So do not think because you text the agent and say, hey, my buyer is wanting, or let's say a seller, hey, buyer's agent, my seller wants the lease back to actually end April 15th instead of April 20th because they don't want to pay for those extra days. That would not be giving correct notice. It has to be in writing, signed in that case by the seller, and delivered either to the buyer directly or to their agent or to their brokerage. Otherwise, that's not correct notice, and you could charge them from the 15th to the 20th in the example I just gave you. No assignments. You cannot sign your REPC over to somebody unless for the buyer's name you write Jane Doe or assigns. That's how you get around that. Then there's a special assignment addendum. You might be wondering, what is an assignment? Well, generally speaking, it's a property that's a for sale by owner, not on the market, and the seller has way undervalued their property. Your buyer goes under contract on it, and then they find somebody to buy it from them, buy the contract essentially. So let's say somebody has their house listed for $650, and I know darn good and well they could sell it for $750. Then my client goes under contract for $650 and then assigns it to an investor or another client, and they get paid $20,000. And that would be in that assignment addendum that they're selling the contract for $20,000, $30,000. So they're going to make some quick cash assigning this contract. You guys have done 2 in almost 8 years. It doesn't happen that often, but
I'm working on one right now.
well, there you go, girl.
But
they're
it
crazy.
Is an investing group. And so they put it in one person's name, but they want the option to put it in anybody else's name.
Yes, totally fine. Totally fine. You can also do like ETL, like if it's in a trust name or something like that. Like this encompasses everybody in this group. Insurance risk, that's self-explanatory, having insurance on the property. Time is of the essence. That means that the date set forth, like it says in here, you learn in real estate school, the assumption is all deadlines are 5 p.m. unless stated otherwise. And that we are all going to be working towards a smooth and good contract happening and being brought about, that we're not going to sit here and drag our feet on something. Electronic transmission. This was added into the REPC when everybody stopped doing physical copies, saying that electronic signatures and emailing documents is legal. Acceptance. So here's a key on this. Acceptance occurs only when all of the following have occurred. The buyer or seller has signed the offer or counter where noted to indicate acceptance, and buyer or seller or their agent has communicated to the other party or the other party's agent that the offer or counter offer has been signed as required. So that communicated, notice it doesn't say notice like up above. Communicated means, hey, Michelle, my buyer accepted your seller's counter offer. We're under contract. That's communicated. Or, Michelle, here's a copy of the executed contract. My sellers look forward to working with your buyer. That's communicated. You have to communicate that the contract has been accepted. Both of those have to be done. All the docs signed and communicated. Okay, we're 3 minutes over, so I'm hustling here. Seller disclosure deadline, that's when everything in section 7 has to be sent to the buyer. Due diligence, again, the time that the buyer has to do their inspection and check into all the information they found out from the seller disclosure deadline. Financing and appraisal, when that appraisal needs to be done, back, give the buyer time to think about it, that the loan has been through underwriting and approved. We don't necessarily have to have clear to close. There might be a few minor conditions, meaning we just need the most recent bank statement. We need their last pay stub from their job because they've gotten a new one since they've been under contract. Those are minor conditions, but we need to know it's been through underwriting and approved with minor conditions. The settlement date is when everyone's going to go and sign. Now, I had a crazy one happen recently since this whole Russia-Ukraine thing went down, where one of my clients, one of the agents in our office, had a listing up and the buyer's fiance was Russian and couldn't get out of the country, sorry. And the buyer literally went MIA. Her agent could not get in touch with her. The lender could not get in touch with her. Title could not get in touch with her. And we knew the contract was going to default, that the buyer literally was not going to show up on closing day. For the seller to not be in default themselves, the seller had to go to the title company and sign, even though we knew the buyer wasn't going to show up. We have to do everything to stay legal on a contract. I think the one advice I can give you as new agents is take all of this very seriously. I know you might not feel like it's as serious as coming from a lawyer, but these documents were drafted by lawyers. And these are legal binding contracts that have financial implications for both buyer and for seller. So it is very important that you learn all you can about these documents and take that very seriously. It's not to be taken lightly. Offer, time, and acceptance. This is when you want the seller to accept. If I sent it today and my client signed it before 5 p.m. today, I would probably say the acceptance is tomorrow night by 5, just because I don't want them to be able to look at and get offers over the weekend. But I might call and they might say, we will not respond to offers until Monday. So then if they're giving me that warning, I'll put Monday. And they might say, and my clients get off of work at 5, we're going to need some time to go over them. So I'm going to be respectful and put my best foot forward and put like 9 or 10 p.m. that night. These little things make all the difference in the world when you are trying to be a team player and get a contract accepted. So any questions for me as we did this kind of deep dive into the REPC? No worries. I know it's overwhelming. Like I said, Ritz posts all these videos in our YouTube channel. You can go back and rewatch this. There's other videos where I go into the REPC in detail on our high performance team member vault, where all the videos are. So you can go in there and watch videos about the REPC and how to fill them out and what all the different sections mean. There's even a video of Dean going over it. Probably way better than mine. Might be more boring, but poor Dean. He does a deep dive into the REPC as well. So if you guys don't have any questions, next Tuesday, we will focus more on the actual case studies, but we kind of touched on one today. You could totally print out all those docs that I showed you for number 1. There's a video of me going over number 1 already on the YouTube channel. Go watch it, pause it, fill out your sections as I go through filling out mine. So I've done number 1 and number 2 in videos. So go look for those and send them over to me when you have them ready and I'll check them off.
I do have a question, but it's about something else. Can I call
Go
you
ahead.
or you on here?
No, go ahead. Because we all might learn something. Go right ahead, Mitchell.
Okay. So I have my walkthrough on the new build at noon. And I
Awesome.
know we just like go through and put blue tape on stuff, but is there anything I should be looking for? Anything I shouldn't be worried about that I maybe think that I should be worried about? You know what I mean?
It's more cosmetic things. Your client did an inspection,
Okay.
correct?
Well, he was wanting to, and so I like told him pillar to post, another guy that's local down here, and he's like, that seems expensive for new build. I'm like, well, that's the price for new build, so it's more for not new
Yeah.
build. And he was like, well, he has been in construction like his whole entire life, and he's an older man, and he is very meticulous. So he's like, maybe I can just do it, but I'm gonna go and see how it looks and whatever, and maybe I'll hire someone. So he hasn't done it yet. He might do it, but we're supposed to close on Friday. So he told me no.
Well, then there you go. That's totally fine. And like I said, he's protected because he has a home warranty from
Yeah.
the builder. There's
And it's the standard one, so it's a year.
yeah. So there you go. I am not super concerned for you. You want to walk through, just look for things like Michelle, like open the cupboard doors and drawers in the kitchen. Make sure everything opens and closes smoothly. Check all the doors in the house, the doorknobs, make sure they're secure and not rattling. Open and close all the windows. Make sure they open and close smoothly. Make sure there's screens on every window. I'm trying to think of things. Make sure the carpet isn't lifting anywhere. Make sure one of the things I noticed, and I noticed a lot with my house when I built, sometimes when there's white trim in the house, they miss a spot because they're already primed white.
Yeah.
Just look at the sheen, make sure they're evenly shiny. So if there's any spots that have that more rough appearance, then it's just the primer. But literally take blue tape with you and just go around the house, turn all the lights on and off, turn all the ceiling fans on and off, turn the heater and the air conditioner on while you're there. Turn
Okay.
all the faucets on in the house while you're there and let them run for like 5 minutes, turn them off, look under all the sinks and make sure there's no leaks. Flush every toilet, turn the oven on, turn the dishwasher on, turn each burner on the stove on, run the microwave for 5 seconds. So just those little things to make sure everything's working.
Okay. So if like water's not on yet, then do we need to tell them we need to come back? I don't
The
know if
water should
water's
be
on
on
or
at the
not.
house. I highly doubt the water's turned off.
I have no idea. I just
It should be.
I don't know what I'm doing.
I would be shook if the water was turned off.
Okay.
The water was totally turned on. So
I mean, I'm just not expecting anything, like with
Yes.
these people.
yes.
So-
You're expecting the worst. Turn the showers on, turn the tubs on,
Okay.
like all of those things. Again, he has a home warranty. So then if the water isn't turned on, you tell him. I'd recommend when you get the water turned on, and he's going to know this, but this is just going to make you appear to know what you're talking about. I would
Yeah.
encourage you when you get the water to turned on, flush every toilet, turn each sink on for 5-10 minutes, run the bathtubs, turn on the showers, flush the toilets, do all of those things to make sure there's no issues.
Okay.
So yeah, there's one thing that agents can buy that's like a really cheap investment is, and your husband might even have one, the little, oh gosh, I can't even remember the name right now, but the little electric plug where you plug it into the wall to see if there's electricity going to the plugs and all the plugs work. That's something you could buy in the
We have
future.
that.
Well, then there you go. Take
It's
it
not
with
a
you.
plug,
He's
it's
going to be
a
like,
pen, and you touch it
he's-
to the thing.
he's going to be like, whoa, like this girl is on it. She brought her A game. Like he'll be so impressed. If you're like, okay, well, you start looking around. I'm going to go turn every faucet on. I'm going to flush every toilet. I'm going to turn every shower on and leave them running. I'm going to turn every light in the house on. I'm going to turn the oven on, heater on, and you just give him your list. Don't worry, I'll come back. I just want to get all these things running so that we can make sure that they're working properly. He's going to be like, whoa, bro, like, go Michelle. So these are just the little things that let them know you care and you go the extra mile and you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's why
So there you go.
because I don't know what I'm doing. So thank you.
Well, guess what? Today you get to fake it till you make it, girlfriend.
My whole life. That's all I've got.
Boom, we got it. Okay,
And I
sounds
have a
good. If nobody has any other
Crunchyroll bluetooth.
questions,
From Walmart.
here we go. Here we go. All right, you guys have a great day. I'll see you all soon.
Cool. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jen.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.